All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, JK, and I am here with very special guest, Kendra Lahue. So, before getting into the meat of today's episode, I first, as always, take a moment just to express gratitude. Thank you for anybody who's chosen to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. You have a lot of content that you can consume these days. So I truly never take it for granted that you chose to press play on Help Me Understand. So I'm going to begin this particular conversation differently than I've ever began an episode before. And it's because I want to start with reading something that Kendra posted in the caption of a reel. And I'll have a link to her Instagram in the show notes. And this is a post back from January 11th of this year. And it's really, from my perspective, going to set the stage for the conversation that we're going to have. So I'm going to read this to you, and then we'll go from there. So you wrote, "Look, I get it. You played sports your entire life. You are not unfamiliar with the gym, working out, or nutrition. You know how to work out. Things just changed when your sports ended. Suddenly, the structure was gone. Your coaches were gone, and there was no one telling you what to do, when to do it, how to do it anymore. You are a locked-in robot for what? Your entire life? The identity change and shift is drastic and sudden. Everything ends abruptly. It makes sense why you feel the way you do. I went through this exact thing too, post-college basketball. I was working in the corporate world, sitting at a desk all day. I planned to work out, but then I was tired. I didn't feel like it. I was not consistent consistently." That was a good line. "Motivation was gone. I didn't know why. I felt embarrassed, uncomfortable in my body, slow and unathletic and unhappy. New feelings I never felt before. Finally, I got tired of feeling freaking tired and uncomfortable in my own skin. I wanted to be athletic again. I wanted to move again and feel good. It was at this point I hired an online trainer to help me get back on track." Man, that was really well written. That was only a snippet of it, by the way, folks. So with that, I'm going to turn this over. And first, Kendra, welcome to the Help Me Understand podcast. I appreciate you being here. I want you to start wherever you want to in giving us some context into the lead up to writing that particular post. Anything you can help us understand any of the experiences that contributed to that particular post that you wrote.
Sure, yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with I was an athlete my entire life. So since I was 4, I was playing all the sports. Every season I was involved in something, eventually leaned into basketball where I'd play, all the with the school and then with the club teams and whoever. Eventually, yeah, I went to college, played basketball, and at that point, I was a exercise science major, pre-medicine, and college basketball player. And I always had a strong kind of passion and interest in the exercise science pieces and the nutrition pieces, and I found it fascinating how um, so many like chronic diseases could be prevented or not as severe if you focus on nutrition and exercise. So early on in my college years, I was studying that and I found it fascinating, but I had this plan to become a doctor, become a physician. So I don't know if you knew that or not, but so I was studying that all through college and yeah, kind of like I talked about in that post, your whole life is told to you when you're a college athlete, like you are a basketball player and that's your job.
Yeah.
You've got practices for 3 hours a day. You've got your strength um, and conditioning after practice, before practice. You're seeing the athletic trainers, the team doctors before for an hour, half hour after. Like your whole life is scheduled for you. And stuff related to kind of the mindset there is like you always have this inner fire and competition too and reason to work out, like a very strong why all the time from the time you're I don't know, probably super young, but at least like middle school, like you want to make varsity, you want to be a starter. Then
Yep.
you get to high school and you're like, okay, I want to make the varsity team. Now I want to be a starter. Now I want to play college. And I've got people like trying to take my spot. And then you get to college and same thing, I want to start. I want to, we want to make it to the national tournament to win the conference, and now I've got freshmen trying to take my spot. So you're constantly trying to be better. So you don't necessarily need any like additional motivation. It's all right there to play and to get better and to work on yourself and be doing all the things. And then suddenly and you've got coaches and teammates holding you accountable. So built-in
Right.
accountability,
Yeah.
built-in program, you're locked in for most of your life. And then at some point that ends. And so does all the excitement with it too, like the fans and the media and whatever else you have going on, like refs and all the trips and the games.
Yeah.
So there's a whole identity shift at the end of that. But kind of back to my journey. So post college, college ends, and I'm still in medicine and pursuing becoming a physician. So I'm working in the emergency rooms across the US, and I worked in Miami, Detroit, Louisville, and then I'm from Washington State. So I had a home emergency room that I worked in up there.
Okay.
So kind of like my interest of what I was studying, I'm like now seeing it real life where there's of course, there's the emergent like accidents and whatnot that come in, but
Right.
there's also like the chronic conditions that become emergent that you are now seeing in the ER, and people are really
Mm.
sick and
Uh-huh.
dying. And I'm like, wow, a lot of this stuff could have been kind of prevented on the front end with fitness, nutrition, not smoking, not drinking as much, all of those things. So I'm now seeing that in real life. And then kind of fast forward through that journey, I eventually work my way up in this same company, and I'm working like a corporate desk job from home by myself. I'm at home, stressed out, working like 60 hours. And that's kind of where my post was at. And I'm like stressed all the time. I'm not working out. I'm sitting all day. I don't feel good. I've never felt like this before. Like my clothes aren't fitting like I like them to. I feel literally slow and just like
Mm.
gaining weight, gaining fat, but I don't want to go to work out after work because I'm tired. Just want to
Yeah.
go sit on my couch and eat some more food that tastes good. And that's a whole nother like topic that I don't know if we'll get into, but like going from college athlete nutrition to post college athlete nutrition,
Oh yeah, I heard it's wild.
you can't quite eat the same way that we did.
Yeah.
Little different. I was like just at a game this past weekend, and I saw the boys team after they played. They all come out with their stacks of like boxes of pizza. They
Yep.
all have their own individual. That was us too. So
Yeah, not quite like that anymore.
yeah, not anymore. Little different. So, but you kind of have to like relearn that. Like, I mean, maybe some people do, but you kind of continue to eat sort of similarly for a while until you're like, oh, I gotta change something here.
Yeah.
Um, So that's part of that. But anyway, yeah, I did hire eventually. I got tired of that. I'm like, I saw one of old teammate of mine was actually accepting online clients. So a former college basketball player. And so I hired her as my online trainer. She did my nutrition. She did my workouts, which was the whole thing. Cause I mentioned that in the post, it's like, I know how to work out. I
Yeah.
know how to do this stuff. And
Yeah,
I
you
studied
went to
this.
school for this.
Yeah. Why
Yeah.
am I not doing it? Which is a whole like mindset thing of like, I should
Right.
know how to do this. I'm an athlete, and I was like hard on myself for that. Like, why am I not doing this?
Yeah.
So that was interesting. But, I kind of got back on track there, ended up, losing 20 pounds, got consistent in the gym again for the first time since college. And that was about 4 years later. And then I had some kind of inner personal growth stuff. And I was like, let me take a step back from medicine for a second. This
Okay.
job is not working. I do know exercise science. I have a degree in this. Let me kind of look into that. And so I did start working as a personal trainer in a local gym in Portland. and got my, training certifications as well around that time,
Okay.
which I was just going to do temporarily to apply to med school and personal train on the side at this time. But really, it's reinforced for me. I'm like seeing the difference we can make kind of on this preventative side. And I was working with a lot of kind of big weight loss clients at this time, and they're coming in looking to lose 50, 100 pounds, and they're on like high cholesterol, high blood pressure meds. And then
Yeah.
we're like making big changes, and they're getting off the meds, and they're losing 50 pounds, 100 pounds, and getting consistent, getting strong again in the gym. And so at that point, I'm like, I love this, and I love the impact we can make here. I've always wanted to like be self-employed, and I think this is what I'm meant to do. And so I kind of went all in there for a couple years in person, had some good mentors. And then the pandemic hit. And that at that point, that's when I started my own business, and was kind of forced, but also ready to
Right.
like dive all in there, and
Yeah.
went all online at that point. And yeah, so now going into year 5 of my own business, but have been coaching people for the past like 7, or I think I'm going on 7 years. And at this
Wow.
point, I'm now working with kind of that former athlete, looking to get back in shape again.
Yeah. Oh man, there's no shortage of stuff that we can unpack. So I'm going to try and narrow it down to things I want to the most like the biggest things that I want to dig into.
Yeah.
First, thanks for taking the time to share some of the context, because I know there's so many layers we could get
Yeah.
into. Some of the context that went into what you so eloquently wrote in that particular post. And when I reached out to you, I'd had this idea in the back of my head for quite some time,
Mhm.
around reaching out to you to get your perspective and your take on something that I've been seeing with my own clients that I've been working with for a number of years now, but couldn't quite articulate exactly what I was seeing. And then I read the
Mm.
post and I was like, oh, well, well, of course she's able to basically nail it because she's lived it,
Mm.
and now she's seen it from both sides. So yeah, truthfully, I didn't know the depths of like the pre-med and background that
Mhm.
you had.
Mhm.
I think from just reading the information like on your website, I was aware that you had done some work there, but I didn't know how deep
Mhm.
that had gone. And I find it super interesting that you spent time on the front lines of seeing what happens, what potentially, respectfully, can
Mhm.
happen when people are not invested in their health and their
Yeah.
fitness.
Mhm.
And let me ask you this, because the assumption that I make, and I'm always willing to be wrong with the assumptions, because that's usually what assumptions are. Um, the assumption that I make is that you get to a point where you're just so frustrated with being on like if there's 10 steps to something being like at the point of being at death's door, and step number
Mm.
10 is like, okay, this is about to, like, this is bad, like bad.
Mhm.
You get to a point where you get frustrated that you're always meeting the person at step 8, 9, or 10. And you're
Mm.
like, man, what if I could have met you at step 1 or 4 or even 6?
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a bit about that? Am I off base on that, or is that something that was that kind of the feeling?
So you're talking about my time when I'd see someone in the ER?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I was not providing patient care. So I don't know if you know what a medical scribe is. So luckily I
Mhm.
was just documenting. I was
Okay.
in the room and very
Yeah.
firsthand, but yeah, I did, that was some thoughts, because it's like, dang, if we could have worked on this a few years ago, things would
Right.
be completely, I mean, you don't know for sure. Maybe not completely different, but I think that we could have made some big changes earlier.
Yeah.
And that's been reaffirmed when I've seen clients now where they come to me on a high like I had a client earlier this year on a high cholesterol medication. It's going up, 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 up. And
Yep.
then we make some changes to nutrition, and she is now completely off that medication. She's at a healthy body weight. She's maintaining it. So yeah, that is frustrating, I would say. And I wish I could see some people sooner. And I feel more of when I see people try kind of fads over and over and over
Yeah.
and not be successful, not be successful, not be successful, and know that, they've been doing that for their entire life or years. But really, if we started working on habit change and food relationship and those kinds of things earlier, it'd be a whole different, like they'd
Yeah.
be at a whole different place
Yeah, that makes
versus
sense.
that cycle. But yeah, I get what you're
Yeah.
saying. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, you strike me as somebody who's pretty observant, so I've got to believe that even with not necessarily being like hands-on with the
Hmm.
individual, you're in that environment and
Hmm.
you're surrounded by that,
Yeah.
like constantly surrounded by that, and especially when you're not when you potentially are a bit more like in the know, especially from the exercise and nutrition aspect of it,
Yeah.
as you are there doing maybe the clerical work or whatever it may have been.
Hmm.
It's kind of like you're viewing it. To me, you're looking at it still from a bit of a different lens
Yes.
than someone who maybe has a background that's been nothing but administrative work throughout, like they were a business admin major or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the way that I was just kind of thinking about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
Okay. So let's talk about let's switch gears
Mm.
into the athlete. And I struggle to say former athlete. So let me say former college athlete.
Okay.
Let me just say that just because I know I got a couple of my friends who would be like, bro, I am still an athlete. I'm like, you know what? That is fine. That's
True.
you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. So um, let's let's talk about a couple of things that, from your perspective, you believe that are kind of the most common, for lack of a better way to put it, mistakes
Mhm.
that former college athletes are making in terms of, from what I see, I believe they're trying to apply some of the same sort of things that quote
Mm.
unquote worked for them
Mhm.
in that previous environment, where you so well explained, listen, stuff is structured, you have a schedule, it's provided for you, there is really no, like, if you can't be motivated in that environment where somebody's always trying to take your spot, there's always a chip in front of you, like there's something that's
Mhm.
there, you've got fans, like there's something,
Yeah.
then like it's almost kind of all built in for
Mhm.
you.
Mhm.
And then, however, there are certain habits and there are certain things that I believe, I'm assuming, you develop, and then what happens is then you take that and you try to still implement that while
Mhm.
also, if you're a parent or a partner, or
Mhm.
you've got just responsibilities are different. What are a
Yeah.
couple, I mean, two or more things that you most commonly see former college athletes trying to do the same thing, but
Yeah.
listen, the game has changed. Like literally the game has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's quite a few things there, from either a working out standpoint or nutrition standpoint.
Yeah.
Um,
Down to go
I
whatever direction you
Okay.
want. Yeah.
I think from a fitness standpoint, and you kind of touched on those, is trying to do what you did while you were a college athlete to achieve the same body that you had now. And a lot of the people I'm working with now are probably more in their 30s at least. And
Yeah.
um, things are different from a lot of different perspectives. Um, so some women I've worked with, they think, I'm just going to add more cardio and more basketball games, and that will make up the calories that I'm burning playing basketball to help me
Okay.
look like I did before.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot to that, but you're definitely not going to make up. It's not the same at all. And honestly, I find the more from a personal perspective, the more basketball I'm playing now, and I'm 32, so I'm starting to like feel things a lot more than when I was 20. And I feel like it's a lot harder when I play more basketball because my joints hurt a little bit more, my back hurts, and it's hard for me to lift on days after
Mm,
I play basketball and get a little bit kind of like beat up because you're getting hit. And
right.
um, yeah, so things are different. So just trying to make up, I think that's a big mistake that I see a lot is people will think, let me just add more games of basketball.
Okay.
When really I think that they're looking for a certain like body composition that they had, and you're never going to replicate college basketball because like I said, we're playing practices were usually 2 to 3 hours per day, 6 days per week or 5 days per week plus games.
Yeah.
And then you've got your other workouts and the intensity of the games and your strength and all of that stuff. And we also don't have, I briefly mentioned this at the beginning, depending on where you went, I guess, but we had a full like team of athletic trainers and team doctors that were working on us before and after practice.
Yeah.
And personally, I do go to like a sports med chiro 1 to 2 times per month and massage every other week. But busy people aren't, and that's expensive. Like people aren't doing that necessarily. Um, and doing the strength training to kind of supplement playing that much basketball.
Yeah.
Um, and things are different. So, one of my clients or a few of my clients are moms. And so they've got 2 young kids running around or 3, and they're working their full time 40+ hour jobs. You're not going to be working out for 5 hours. So things are going to be
Yeah.
different. So trying to go all in 6 days a week with these long workouts. I'm going to do cardio every day. I'm going to do strength every day and setting up. And I think you'd mentioned this to me at one point, like the more is better
Yeah.
kind of mindset. We can shift that. It's going to look different. Like you don't need to be doing the most to achieve kind of the body composition goals you're looking for and to move better, and feel better.
Let me let me ask you something.
Mm-hmm.
So as you are talking about this, what pops into my head as you're talking about what I perceive as, okay, we are post college. We have started getting into a different phase of life,
Mm-hmm.
and now currently what I'm gathering is almost like trying to achieve a previous body composition by
Mm-hmm.
going back to doing some things. But so the question that I have is, as a college athlete, and I know that you do not speak for every college athlete. So for anybody that's out there that's like, well, she doesn't speak for me, nobody asked you. I get you. So as a college athlete, though, how much of a focus is there on your training and your performance being part of achieving a specific body composition
Mm-hmm.
during your that just struck me. I'm like, is that I'm ignorant here when I say I was unathletic. I actually have a T-shirt that says unathletic.
Really?
Yeah. Oh,
You don't
Kendra,
play sports?
uh, I was. I've told this so many times. I was a fifth quarter All Star, and I don't know if you had that term.
No.
Okay, so up until junior high school, I was a fifth quarter All Star, which meant uh, I didn't play. I was on the soccer team and I was on the basketball team. Those were
Mhm.
no cut sports, and also they would specifically put 10 to 15 more minutes on the clock after the game was over, so that the scrubs could could get on the field or get on the. That's how bad I was. Okay,
Okay,
and
got
I'm
it.
okay, and I'm okay with that. And then in high school, I was on the track team. Again, it was a no cut sport. Um, I didn't know that you couldn't knock down the hurdles. I figured if I got where I needed to go, it was good. So
Run
yes,
through them. Yeah, you made
yeah.
it.
So anyways, back to the back to the point though. So yeah, um, so yeah, how much? I mean, how much talk? How much focus? Not necessarily talk, but how much focus is
Mhm.
there on your body composition when you are a college athlete?
Yeah, interesting. I think in my personal experience in basketball,
Yeah.
there wasn't much talk about that, I think. I have my own personal stories of kind of myself in basketball versus life feelings on that, I guess. But in terms of like college basketball, I don't recall that being much of a conversation. I do
Yeah.
think other sports I've seen from other people, but I don't know super firsthand of like track or gymnastics where there was
Yeah.
more talk
I could
of
see that.
losing weight. And I've seen different like influencers and whatnot kind of talk about that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a good
but in
point.
terms of like my experience in basketball, I think not much of a talk of it then. I think now, what I'm hearing is women wanting to like look like they did back in college, like
Yeah.
be like that lean again.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me though to now say in your 30s you want to go back and look like you did at a time when there wasn't where the primary focus wasn't on looking like you did.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just
Right. It's more
kind of wild.
performance. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's almost like there is something to this whole like, hey, if you put the priority on eating in a way that supports the training and the lifestyle that you have, you potentially would meet your body composition goals. All right. Well, that's the episode. We just
There it
solved all
is.
your problems. There you go. No.
There it
Okay.
is.
Okay. So, yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely helpful as far
Hmm.
as, hey, this concept of, well, if I add some more games, that sort of thing, sign up for another season, another
Hmm.
league,
Hmm.
then that potentially will help me. Um, so where do you say if you're working with someone and they seem to think that that's where they are right now, like when you meet them, that's where they currently are, where they're thinking, okay, whether it's signing up for more games or whether they're just basically what I call like transferring the obsession,
Hmm.
and now they've replaced the games with a treadmill or
Hmm.
a boot camp class or something like they just keep
Yeah.
adding more and more and more.
Hmm.
Where do you start with that? And then I'd also like to just after that we'll get into what's a nutrition mistake
Hmm.
that folks are making. But where do you start with someone who you've identified? Okay, I've seen this movie before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
See what we're doing.
Yeah, I like to try to get people to do a little bit more of a focus on strength training and then supplement the cardio if they want to.
Okay.
A lot of the women I'm working with currently do play in, well, some of them, like probably 75% of them do play some sort of basketball right now, like
Okay.
locally here. So they're either playing games 1 to 3 times per week. So I try to help them add some strength training in, and most of them are willing and interested in doing that as well. So at least 2 to 3, maybe 4 days per week, they're doing strength training and focusing on getting stronger and making sure that they are pushing their limits, which is a whole nother topic of this conversation. Is I think generally I see with women in general
Mm-hmm.
of not lifting heavy enough or not pushing themselves with weight. And then a whole kind of another tier of that is like someone who was an athlete their entire life and a college basketball player or whatever type of athlete, like you've got a lot of muscle on you and being starting to push your ceiling, which I had to be called out on as well. And I didn't even recognize I wasn't pushing myself. Um,
Oh,
so
really?
pushing weight for their abilities. Hmm.
Wait, unpack that for a minute for me.
Yeah. Okay. I'll
Yeah.
just tell you the story. So it was when I
Yeah.
was personal training for the first time.
Uh-huh.
And it was probably like a year in or something. And my boss was a former like football player, like D1 football player, semi pro, something, big
Mm-hmm.
dude. And we were just talking about my personal goals over lunch, casual. And he's like, wouldn't it be cool like if you, or I think I said it, and he's like, yeah, it'd be cool if you got like shredded one time and like really like go for it. And I'm like, yeah, I've always wanted to kind of try that. And he's like, but you don't really like push yourself. And I was so offended because I'm like,
I say what?
excuse me, I don't
Yeah.
push myself. Like, what do you mean? I'm like lifting more than everybody else in this gym, some of the men too. Like,
Yeah.
what is this guy talking about? And like my friend who was also a trainer, and he's like, yeah, she doesn't like push herself. I'm like, excuse me.
You're like, yo, backstabber.
Like, what are you guys talking about? And I was so offended for a while, but then I like actually thought about it. And he's like, well, yeah, Kendra, you're not pushing your ceiling. Like, and I'm like, I'm lifting more than everyone in this gym. Um, which was true. Like I was lifting more than most of the women that I was seeing or any clients or whoever that was
Yeah.
coming into that gym, but I was nowhere near like my strength levels.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't really, and we didn't at that time we didn't know a lot like in like college. Like I didn't really recognize, which sounds silly to say out loud, but I didn't really recognize that if I got stronger, like that would help me in basketball at that time.
Right.
I was
Yeah.
more focused on like athletic performance and conditioning and like getting faster, jumping higher, and being more conditioned. That
Right.
I was doing strength training, but I don't think I was really pushing strength too much.
Right. Right.
Um, so that's interesting. So he called me out on that, and that's where kind of things changed for me. And I started actually pushing like my levels, like for a long time. And I still struggle with this, and I'm still working on it. I don't get very close to failure super often, which
Okay.
is interesting because I feel like I'm closer to it than I am, I guess. And I'm like, well, that's already heavy. Like no one else is doing that, so it's got to be that's got to be good, right? So yeah.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Okay. That is interesting. I unfortunately I can relate.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Yeah, because when I worked with a coach all last year, and there was one point where we were talking about something, and he was reviewing one of my form check videos,
Hmm.
and he was like, "Man," and he was spot on. I mean, like dead on. He was like, something that I just noticed is he's like, your intensity for lower body. He's like, when you lift lower body, he's like, it's a different level of intensity than when you do upper body.
Oh.
He's like, I'm just noticing. He's like, is there something to that? And I was like, say less. Done. Like I get, because when I went back and looked at it, I was like, you know what? He's absolutely right. And it took a different set of eyes to
Hmm.
look and be like, I'll take a split squat to like near death.
Yeah.
But then when it came to like a press or something like that, I didn't, yeah,
He's
wasn't
so
quite
true.
wasn't quite doing it. So yeah, coaches, this is why coaches need coaches. So
Exactly.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting too, because from where I sit, I would make the assumption that it would almost be the opposite,
Hmm.
that someone who has been a previous like collegiate level athlete and then is
Hmm.
continuing their athletic pursuit, that
Hmm.
you're almost needing to tell them to like, yo, you can take it down a notch. Like you don't have to
Mm.
PR every single workout. However, I see where you're coming from, because I think that what I'm translating is that it potentially is also sport dependent. So if
Hmm.
if during your playing career, your majority of your playing career, you lifted heavy, however, you also had to balance, I've got games and I've got all of you have other things going
Yeah.
on. There
Hmm.
may be a season of lifting heavy, but it may not necessarily be like going to failure
Hmm.
in season or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I meant just,
That's
that's interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
So true. Hmm.
That I knew I reached out to the right person.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
There's yeah. You could see it kind of both ways on taking it down or needing to push a little bit more. And I know like I have a college football player and he like was always like back squatting 500 pounds, bench pressing 300,
Yeah.
whatever. And they're definitely going to failure.
Yeah.
And he just has no desire to do that anymore and just would rather
Mm,
just like kind of be like more bodybuilder type
yeah.
and
Yeah. Like
just, yeah.
hypertrophy type stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That totally makes it. That totally tracks now.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, it is interesting too, just because, quite a while ago, I started getting into like the Christian Thibodeau, like neurotyping type stuff,
Mm-hmm.
with getting an understanding of how different people, we call them like different personality types, like just how they approach training different. And what I've found is that typically for me, just for the clients that I typically work with, the former athletes, they typically, I'm kind of more on the other end of the spectrum. They're lifestyle based clients, primarily in their 40s and older.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not necessarily playing like rec league sports or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're training, and they're training pretty hard. They just tend to be more volume junkies, where I'm just like,
Oh.
you do not need to work out 2 hours or do like two a days or whatever. and they're like running sprints in between, like going to pick somebody up from practice, and it's like, this is not the life that you
Doing the
want.
most.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, let's move to, from a nutrition standpoint, what's
Hmm.
what's something that you're seeing former college athletes try to carry over nutrition wise that it's just not fitting these days.
Yeah, I think there's the initial transition when you first get done with sports of, and I don't know that all people do this, but I think probably a lot kind of continue to eat like they did in college to an extent, um, and don't recognize it until they've put on some weight and they're not quite working out the same. And I think there's a people who put on usually like 20, 30 pounds of, that's what I'm seeing a lot. And then they're like,
Mm.
I want to get back to kind of where I was. And I think, and I don't know for men on this one, but women specifically, there's always this idea of like 1,200 calories or like these pretty super low calorie diets
Yeah.
too.
I'm finding 1500 is the new 1200, by the
Oh,
way.
it's the new
Yeah.
one.
So now
Okay.
15 is the new 12.
15 is
Yeah.
the new 12.
Yeah.
So,
Legit.
yeah.
Yeah. That's where it's at.
Yeah. So I see women who are kind of like built like me, like a lot of muscle, tall, like that's not for you. So they think that they need to do this super low calorie diet, like 1,500 calories to lose the weight and get back to it. But in reality, like they have so much muscle mass. If they are playing and lifting still, like BMR, everything is going still. So you can lose weight on a higher amount of calories. You
Mm.
don't need to drop that low. That will be more sustainable. And you can still get there and still eat more than 2,000, like most likely for a while. And I can
Yeah.
relate to that on my bodybuilding experience, which is extreme. My calories didn't ever get lower than 1,600, even in,
Really?
which is crazy. And I wasn't,
Yeah.
not a professional bodybuilder. I could have come in leaner. I was doing it as healthy as possible, but I still, placed fourth, still was pretty
Nah, you
lean.
got lean. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I
Yeah.
got pretty lean for me, leanest I've ever been. And yeah, I didn't drop below 1,600 calories. And I spent most of my prep
Wow.
around or over 2,000. So that's kind of cool.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that, because you've done two comps, three?
3. I did
You've
2
done
back
three?
to back initially. And then most recently this year, I did 1.
Okay. Yeah, because we
Hmm.
didn't go through like the whole rundown of your resume. So you clearly are still playing, you're actively playing basketball.
Yeah.
You've done have you done wellness all 3 times?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So wellness competitor,
Hmm.
powerlifting
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Am I missing anything else? Are you like a pro champion pickleball player too, or did I miss anything
Could
else?
be. No.
Okay. Okay.
Just kidding.
Okay.
Still competitive in anything.
Yeah, so super well rounded. Okay. So what I'm pulling from this, and again, I come from this with the perspective of primarily working with a psychographic that's probably in a bit of the older range. And
Hmm.
I'm fine. Like, for anybody who's like, you're identifying them as older, I'm 46, so whatever. Um, so the client that I tend to work with, again, is more like, it's more heavily lifestyle based, and
Hmm.
anything that we're talking about from a performance standpoint is typically, if there's a particular event that they happen to have registered for, like a 5K or a
Hmm.
half, Spartan races, Tough
Yeah.
Mudders, like they've
Cool.
registered for different events, things like
Hmm.
that. Rarely is it, I'm also part of like a volleyball league or something like
Hmm.
that. I have a few people that I talk to like in person who do stuff like that, but none of my online clients. So what I tend to picture, both from the nutrition and the training standpoint, is for the ones that I'm working with who are former college athletes, this difficulty in finding what I call the messy middle.
Mm.
So they know how to eat if they're doing, like, if they're in the height of their like season, and
Hmm.
they remember that,
Hmm.
and they know, or they think they know, how to do as little, like eat as little as possible to get as
Mm.
small as possible.
Hmm.
And then when we get to, because I've also worked with some former like bikini athletes and things like
Yeah.
that. So when we get to, okay, now I'm just living my life
Yeah.
because I'm a lifestyle centric
Yeah.
coach. So when they're living their life, finding that messy middle in between,
Mm-hmm.
that's the part that tends to be difficult. So as you are working with people, um, what are some signs that you can help people with to identify they are working towards finding the groove for them? I mean, whether it's recovery wise or um, I don't know, what signs would there be for folks that you're working with along the way that they've found the harmony between
Mm-hmm.
the amount of games they're playing, the food they're like, all that stuff, like just because
Right.
there's no scoreboard anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's no no stars ranking at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what are ways that that person who now has like a whole identity shift,
Mm-hmm.
what are ways that they can help identify, okay, I'm starting to settle in, or not settle, but I'm starting to really like get in my rhythm
Mm-hmm.
now.
Yeah. And are you talking about it? I kind of think of kind of like an all or nothing mindset. Is that
Oh
kind
yeah.
of
Oh,
what you're
abs
seeing? It's like they're really
absolutely.
good all in, and athletes are so good at that, at locking in and just turning it on and going hard for however long, and then they fall off, or whoever
Yeah,
falls
there's
off, and
nothing,
it's
the stuff that you talked, so for example, like you talked about different things, like that really sticks out to me because I have a son who's a junior high athlete. So I
mm-hmm.
just think about like, yeah, he's got like, he didn't make the team last year. Now he's starting this year. So he had something
Nice.
to work towards. Or,
Mm-hmm.
next year he's going to hopefully be on the 8th grade team, but there might be some 7th grader who's coming for it. So he's always got something,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But then, yeah, it's easy to, when you've got something, or it can be easy. But yeah,
Right.
when getting out
That
of that all or nothing.
I
Yeah.
think that's like one of the hardest things that, and you're seeing it with your clients. I feel it myself. I see it with my clients too. It's kind of that middle ground of like not really having a specific goal that you're working towards, but trying to
Yes.
maintain and be healthy and not gain weight, but you're not trying to lose weight. So I think finding that balance nutritionally where you've worked on your habits and you have like a strong foundation there, like things where you are getting protein in most meals, you're getting, vegetables in most meals, and most of the time you're eating healthy, but you're also, or like minimally processed on whole foods, but
Mhm.
you're also able to enjoy fun foods in moderation too without it throwing you into a week long like off track or like binge type cycle. And you're able to have a fun meal and then get right back to your normal habits, and you are able to find some consistency in the gym. And I think one way that I found with my clients, both either weight loss or like athletes who are just looking for just like general health lifestyle or some small body recomposition or whatever, is finding goals outside of weight loss and finding goals within the gym and finding things that you enjoy. And I believe that one strong way to make this whole fitness nutrition a lifestyle is by enjoying it in some way. So if you absolutely hate lifting weights or running or whatever, like I don't think you're going to be super consistent with it. So finding a way to find some love and passion within it. So I find that people setting some strength goals or other goals, whether that's for like a 5K or something else to work towards other than like just losing weight or getting back to how I was when I played college basketball, I think can help you
Yeah.
find that kind of middle ground or balance, but also acknowledging like it's okay to not be chasing goals all the time, and just maintaining is also a goal, and being consistent. Like, this is what I do. I go to the gym 2 days a week, 3 days a week, whatever, and I string train. And that is also like a win.
Yeah.
You don't have to always be losing or always be gaining or always hitting PRs. Like being consistent is great too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I really like that. And I think we're very aligned on that with that approach. And it's taken a while. I have one client, we no longer work together. And when we were working together though, it took us a while to get into the groove because she was like an extremely good I think she was like a D2 soccer player or something like
Nice.
that.
Mhm.
And it took us a while to like find the groove. She was still playing like some like rec league or YMCA or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, and it took us a while. Finally, what we figured out was being able to use that competitiveness and
Mhm.
that driving towards a goal, but spread it out and almost make them like 2 to 3 events a year
Mhm.
versus I've got a game every weekend. So I've
Mm.
always got something to chase. So we
Yeah.
tried to basically like spread the goal out into milestones, I guess, or 3 events a year. So we would
Mhm.
insert like, okay, this is like goal season,
Yeah.
and then slowly work through that, because there was just trying to tell. I've just found that trying to tell somebody who's like a natural born athlete and competitive
Yeah.
to just completely ignore that side of them
Mhm.
isn't helpful, because they're just not wired that way. Like they're just
Yeah.
not built that way. Like in
Mhm.
business, they're not built that way. At
Mhm.
home, they're not built that way.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, I can fold bed sheets better than anybody. I'm like, whatever works for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that competitive
Exactly.
fire never goes.
It
Yeah.
doesn't. Mhm.
Yeah, so that's helpful. All
Yeah.
right. Well, one additional thing that I want to ask you about,
Mhm.
and I don't know really how to transition this, so I'll just tell people the story of, because I wanted you to talk about um, the goals that you may have as a woman, and then also getting into a relationship and being out there and dating and things like that. So I want to share with people kind of what my context was in
Yeah.
this, because I reached out to Kendra and I was like, you just nailed something that has been so like life changing for one of my clients.
Mhm.
So I won't put words in your mouth, but
Mhm.
generally the way that I remember it is you had posted something. I think it was initially in your stories
Mhm.
in response to like a question sticker or something like that. And you started talking about the challenge, and I'm going to call it the challenge of wanting to be strong and really owning having a very strong muscular physique,
Mhm.
and also understanding that you're out there, and if you're like in this particular case, I was working with a client who was single and looking to date and different things like that, and
Mhm.
there was this constant kind of, she was back and forth with, I just want to build as much muscle as possible, and also I'm finding that there might be a guy that I'm interested in. And at some point he just kind of mentions like, I'm not really into that look sort of thing. And she's like, I feel like I'm conflicted,
Mhm.
but we weren't able to really like unlock that until I shared your post with her to be
Mhm.
like, hey, does this kind of sound like what you've been trying to express? And I was telling Kendra before we hit record, I was like, she was just like, OMG, no one has ever. So can you talk a bit just about that? I don't have a
Yeah.
great transition for that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
make sure that's brought up because it unlocked something really, really pivotal for my client at that time. So,
Mhm. Yeah, so I'll talk about it through kind of like my lens and my experience growing up. So I've always been tall, muscular, strong, just generally a bigger frame
mhm.
than like what I felt like I was seeing in like media, and like in movies and whatnot. It was always like, the small, petite
Yeah,
women was attractive to men. And I always felt like if I could lose weight and be smaller, I'd be more attractive or cuter, more dainty, whatever.
yeah,
So that kind of bled a little bit into, I guess, kind of an insecurity about my strength, which kind of leads also into why I never fully pushed myself, but I also didn't really realize I wasn't pushing myself and I didn't even know what was going on in my mind about it.
yeah,
But just kind of an insecurity of being a strong woman and being tall, built, muscular. And if I can, like, I don't want to be stronger than a man,
yeah,
because people already call us like, oh, you don't want to get manly, you don't want to be bulky. Um, just
yeah.
like there's a whole bunch of stuff around that whole topic.
Right.
But yeah, so I have like I used to think about this going into the gym. Like I remember one time last year, and I've worked through this a lot, so I don't think about it too much anymore, but occasionally it'll cross my mind and I'll post about it on social media if I think about it. But I was in a commercial gym and my bench press is pretty strong, I would say, for women generally, and especially in a commercial gym setting. And I walk in and I see this younger group of guys, maybe 20s or so, bench pressing, and one of them failed like 135 at like 1 or 2 reps. So,
Hmm.
and I immediately had in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, should I do something else? Like, I don't know if I want to, because I'm going to have to bench right next to them. And I know 135, I can get that for 10. That's going to be easy for me. And I felt
Subtle flex. I love it. I love
no.
it. I love it.
But I was like insecure myself. And I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Why am I being insecure? Because I can bench 135 for 10 and these guys can't. Like, that's not like, why am I trying to lessen myself so that they feel comfortable and don't feel bad that I'm stronger than them? So anyway, this was a year ago. So I ended up going and doing my bench and worked up to whatever it was that day, maybe like 155 for a couple of reps. And immediately after this whole situation goes on in my head, some other guy comes up to me and he's like, hey, introduced himself. And he's like, I saw you benching right there. I thought you were going like for one and then you repped it easy. Like that was super impressive. Like, nice job. And I'm like, oh, that's so nice. So it was
Yeah.
just like all of that conflicting stuff in my head. And then to have it come back around, I wasn't
Totally
expecting
different.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess, what I kind of have thought myself is just like leaning into these strengths. Like, it's really cool to be strong and a strong woman. And it doesn't make you manly. Like, and that's what I try to portray on my Instagram too, and that's what my whole bodybuilding, that's why I went into bodybuilding, because I was kind of self-conscious of like being tall, strong. And I wanted to prove to myself that I can step out there and I can own this and be like stand in a bikini. Like, I never thought I would ever do that.
Yeah.
And you can be both feminine, you can be strong, you can be tall, you can have a little bit more broader shoulders, thick legs, and you can be both. And usually the comments I think I get from men are coming from like insecure people who are intimidated by someone who is stronger or whatever
Yeah.
that may be. But that doesn't make you any less feminine or attractive. So that's kind of that story,
Man.
I guess.
Well said. Yes. Well said.
Thank
And
you.
as the parent to an 18, almost 19-year-old daughter,
Hmm.
I never get tired of hearing that perspective because it's something that it just helps me just remind me that um, who knows, she could walk into a gym one day or whatever and somebody just makes a comment like that and
Yeah.
just be like, hey, I'm not sure why that has anything to do with what you came there to do, like
Hmm.
at all. Because that is one of the things that I've definitely thought about, especially as I work primarily with female clientele, like not
Hmm.
exclusively. It's just that's just basically kind of how things have shook out.
Hmm.
And one of the common conversations that we'll have, especially when somebody's transitioning from training at home to then
Hmm.
going to train into a gym because they're just too freaking strong to keep using the stuff that they have at
Yeah.
home. You know exactly what I'm talking
I
about. It's
do.
like, yo, like you're past the 35-pound dumbbells at this
Yeah.
point. Like I
Yeah.
remember when they would build up and they're like, well, I have fives, tens, and then a pair of 20s.
Yes.
And
Classic.
why is it always that? Yeah. And then they get to the 35s and I'm like, I'm just telling you, you're going to need more. So they talk about that transition into the gym,
Hmm.
and very transparently, a big part of it is this internal dialogue. Like that's what I would label it as. It's like this internal dialogue of, well, I just feel like, people are going to make comments about me and different things like that. I'm like, well, let's play that out then, because I'm not going to tell you that they won't make comments, but
Hmm.
last time I checked, like you still got a set to do. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I would just
Yeah.
go with it. But I also understand that like my stature and how I am in a gym is not necessarily how everybody is in a gym. And I
Hmm.
understand that. Like I just
Hmm.
really don't care at
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
which is fine. But I also, JK in his like teens and 20s couldn't say that at all because
Yeah.
I didn't start working out till I was 31 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but I really appreciate you sharing that particular perspective, and I think that's a really powerful one for women to
Yeah.
hear, is to really
Mhm.
own your strength, like for
Yeah.
sure, to own your
Yeah.
strength.
And it's
Yeah.
totally intimidating to go into the gym, even if you aren't, super strong yet. Like that's a whole nother thing with women going into the dumbbell section and using the squat racks and the bench. And usually it's pretty male dominated, and
Mhm.
that's intimidating. And I know a lot of my clients are nervous to do that and nervous to step foot in the gym. And some of my male clients are as well, just based on fear of judgment or people
Yeah.
saying things. And uh yeah, you can't, people probably will say things at times. Like I get comments all the time, despite how I look and being strong and knowing what
Hmm.
I'm doing. So, but I still think if you just walk in there confidently and know that you deserve to be there, just own it.
That
Have your
part.
headphones on and just act like you know exactly what you're doing. And when you have a coach, it's way more helpful because you have a plan. You do know what you're doing because your coach told you and you've got a video or whatever. But you deserve to be there, and don't let, someone tell you you can't be, or try to take the bench press from you or whatever, even if you're just bench pressing the bar or whatever. I know I've heard of stories of men trying to take the bench press just because it's not super heavy or whatever. So
Yeah.
everyone deserves to be there and take up space.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Okay, so in bringing this episode to a close, I'm going to
Mhm.
ask you one more question. Well, before I ask one more question, is there anything that I have not asked you about that you wanted to make sure that you were able to talk about? Want to leave some space for that to make sure I didn't zoom past anything that
I
maybe
think
you
we
wanted to share.
covered everything that I had thought about
Okay.
beforehand. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay. So this last question is going to be about a perspective shift that you've had, something that you do differently. I know I'm catching you off guard, and that's okay. So what is something? It doesn't have to be the thing.
Mhm.
This is not a reel where you have to say, this is the one thing
That one thing.
that changed my life. But what is something that you've possibly changed your perspective on or do differently now as a coach that you did, well, yeah, that you did differently before? Maybe your philosophy on a certain thing has changed, how you
Mm.
go about something that's changed over the now, close to 7-ish years that you've been a coach. What's something that's shifted for you?
Hmm. A philosophy. That's a tough one.
It can be wide open. A
Wide open.
philosophy, something that maybe you believed before. Like for instance, I used to be heavy
Mhm.
on the cardio is going to kill your gains. I used to be heavy on that. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Possibly because it fit my narrative, but
Yeah.
because I don't like to do cardio.
Yeah.
But yeah, just anything maybe that you've changed, you've shifted, or you believe different now that you've been in it for a while.
Yeah. That is a tough one. I used to kind of be on that thinking that you didn't have to do, or you don't have to do cardio to lose weight, but it is good for your heart
It is
health.
helpful.
It's good
Yeah.
helpful. It can be
Yeah.
helpful. Um, Hmm. I'll say a personal transition, I guess, of one thing, I guess, because that's more coming to mind,
Yeah.
is one thing that changed for me. And I try to help my clients with this too. So I don't know if my perspective in coaching has fully changed, but um, things changed for me as a woman and former athlete when I stopped chasing like the smallest version of myself, and like always chasing like a number on the scale weight loss, and chasing more of like the strongest version of myself and becoming a better version of myself. That's when I was like truly able to achieve like my best physique ever, and like I'm in way better shape now. Than It's different, but a better shape than when I played college. um so I think shifting kind of a focus there can be really helpful, and not chasing like a number on the scale.
Yeah.
Um, that's been a big one for me. And when I could let go of a scale weight number, and it's totally okay to chase weight loss, and I help people with that all the time. But when you're attached to like oh, when I get to X weight, then I'm going to be confident, then I'm going to be happy, then I'm going to feel good. Like that's not going to happen. Um, so you can chase weight loss, but I think finding love for yourself kind of at all points of that process and chasing some other goals can be really helpful.
So well said. Yes. Well, that is a perfect note for us to wrap this up on, because I could always like start digging more. So perfect note to wrap up on. So in closing things out, let folks know best place to reach out to you, connect with your content, whatever the case may be. And then we'll also have links in the show notes here. But if for the folks who want to connect with you, how can they best do that?
Yeah, Instagram is great at Kendra Lahue. And you said my name correctly. Most people don't get Lahue, so Instagram is great.
Really?
Yeah, I know it. It looked
What did they come up with?
Lahue or Lahue.
For real?
Yeah.
There's no Y on the end. Never mind. All right. You know, that would be can you help me understand where you came up with Huey?
I know. I don't understand it either because like the color hue, like it literally
Yeah.
Lahue, like it looks like it sounds. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, Instagram is great.
Shout out to my mom who was an English major. So it was pretty, you just phonetically, you just sound things out. It's pretty
Yeah,
simple. All
nailed it.
right. So with that, folks, thank you for listening to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. Truly appreciate it. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.